What if the president threatened to take away your nonprofit status? Is that really possible? Can it happen? Well, that's what's currently happening in 2025. Trump has threatened to revoke the 501c3 status of Harvard University. But why is this important for you to know? And how does this impact small and new nonprofits? I'm going to actually break that down in this video, and I'm going to give you a little history you probably didn't know about. So in this video, I'm going to break down what's happening right now and why it's happening and give you some of the details because the details matter. Then I'm going to talk about the history and where in our US history this has actually happened before. But then at the end of the video, I'm going to share what you need to know as a small or new nonprofit and how you can prepare and protect your organization. So let me break down a little bit what actually got us to this point. And in this video, I'm going to share some clips from other sources and also link sources, because if you've watched any of my videos, you should know that I always say, go to the source. Don't just trust what you hear on the internet, but read for yourself. If you don't know me, I'm Tiffany Allen with Boss on a Budget. I help people start their nonprofits and teach them how to grow their nonprofits from the ground up, especially when it comes to raising money. So Trump put out a social media message on his social media platform saying that perhaps Harvard should lose their 501c3 status because they did not comply with some demands that were sent by a few government agencies. Two of their main arguments is basically by having diversion, equity, and inclusion programs, or DEI, which is the scary word of the day, by having those programs that they're being discriminatory and they need to cease those programs, but also claiming they're creating a threatening environment for Jewish students on campus. And what's the basis of this? It's really the protests in favor of Palestine. If you've been reading the news, similar demands were sent to Columbia University. They complied and did not fight back, but Harvard actually pushed back on the demands. So what actually happened? The Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Education sent basically a demand letter to the university requiring them to enact certain policies and to cease certain programs and operations. I'll give you a quick rundown of the main highlights of what those were. So they wanted to address governance and leadership, and the gist of that was they want to reduce the power held by students and untenured professors. So I'm assuming that there are some processes, probably committees, things that the university is doing to be inclusive of all perspectives, of all voices, that they don't want the university to be influenced by. Another thing they brought up in this letter was requiring that they introduce merit-based hiring reform. And this is an attack on DEI programs, basically saying you can only hire people based on merit and you can't specifically recruit to get certain groups based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. I'm reading directly from the letter here when I'm mentioning this. And this is related to their promotion, compensation, and related practices. They also are attacking their admissions. So they're saying by August, they have to create a merit-based admissions process and that people can't be selected based on their race, their color, their sex, national origin, the same categories that I just listed before. They also want to require the university to get an external party to review their student body, their leadership, to see what their viewpoints are and to make sure that all the viewpoints of people who work for the organization or work with the organization are diverse. There's another program talking about reforming programs with egregious records of anti-Semitism or other bias. They also are requiring them to discontinue DEI. They say here that the university must immediately shutter all DEI programs, offices, committees, positions, and initiatives under whatever name and stop all of their DEI-based policies. Also, when it comes to their disciplinary policies, it says here Harvard must immediately reform its student discipline policies and procedures so as to swiftly and transparently enforce its existing disciplinary policies with consistency and impartiality and without double standards based on identity or ideology. There are some other points here about whistleblower reporting and protections, transparency, and monitoring, making sure that federal regulators can monitor their adherence to these requirements. So this was a list of demands that was sent to Harvard. After they reviewed it, they refused to comply with those demands. And as a result, the administration has this joint task force to combat anti-Semitism. They announced a freeze on more than $2.2 billion in federal funding for the school. The Department of Homeland Security has also been pressuring them to report on their international students, those who have been participating in protests, to pass along that information. They were testing the waters with this last year, even before the inauguration this year, with a bill that was introduced in the House of Representatives. I did a video on this before, so check it out so you can see the breakdown of the kind of things that they want to do to reform the IRS and how they monitor 501c3 organizations. So the first thing we need to understand is that this isn't the first time a president has threatened the 501c3 status of organizations. John F. Kennedy wanted the IRS to investigate right-wing groups, and Richard Nixon wanted to use the IRS to target his political opponents and audit their organizations. So this isn't the first time that a president has tried to push or bully the IRS to do some things according to their agenda. And it's not just presidents who want to use the IRS to move against their opponents. The FBI actually has tried to use the IRS in history to try to go after certain organizations. The FBI targeted Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with an audit of his nonprofit organization to get more information and to monitor their activities. And throughout the years, other nonprofit organizations have complained that the government is using the IRS as a way to unfairly target them. And it's typically through audits. But the situation today is a little different because it was a direct threat to take away the 501c3 status of a university because they didn't comply with what the president and his administration is seeking from them. This has actually happened to another university in our U.S. history, where another university actually got their tax-exempt status revoked. Bob Jones University, it's a small Christian university in South Carolina, had a policy that did not allow their students to have interracial marriages. It was actually a policy on the books. In 1976, the IRS discovered that they were engaging in unlawful racial discrimination, and they actually revoked their tax-exempt status because of it. The college then sued the federal government, and the case actually made it all the way to the Supreme Court. Their claim was because the Bible prohibited race mixing and they were a Bible college, it was going against their religious freedom to not allow them to have that policy in place. Well, in 1983, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the IRS that racial discrimination was unlawful and it violated national public policy. So they did not win their case and their status was revoked. Fast forward to 1998, Congress actually passed a law, the IRS Restructuring and Reform Act, and part of that law was to prevent the president and other government officials from interfering with the business of the IRS. And it also includes penalties for people who try to use the IRS as a way to target or discriminate against certain organizations. So the question is, can the president actually take away a university's nonprofit status? I would say in a normal world, the answer is no, that the president can't unilaterally say, you can't do this, and then the IRS respond and do it. In normal circumstances, it's a review process that the IRS has to go through to make a final decision. I will be honest and say we are not in normal times. We have a current administration that is bypassing a lot of the normal processes and normal rules that are in government, and also defying judicial orders and things like that. So I can say based on our history that it's not possible, but I can't say for sure that it won't happen just because it's not supposed to be possible. And when I'm saying possible, I mean it shouldn't be possible for the president or any other government official to use the IRS as a way to target an organization to do their bidding. So now the question comes to you, because you may be saying to yourself, well, Tiffany, I'm not Harvard. I'm a small organization. What does this mean for me, and should I be worried? And my response to that is get your house in order and make sure that your organization is in compliance. Make sure that you know the rules for your organization and just be prepared, because I am not a psychic. I can't predict the future, but I can also look at history. I can look at patterns, and I can make a pretty big assumption that other nonprofits may have to deal with this same issue. And it's not just big nonprofits. You may be lumped in based on the kind of work you do into some of this political warring that's going on, and you may fall prey to some of this. So my response to you is to always keep your eyes open and watch. Because we have a lot of news going on, there's just a lot of chaos going on with the economy and with layoffs and with government actions and executive orders, that it's hard to stay focused. But pay attention to the things that directly impact your nonprofit. Because if you're going around thinking, oh, it won't happen to me, I think that is misguided. So here are a couple things I want you to take away from this. The first thing is understand compliance with the IRS and the things that can get your status revoked. Because the reality is the IRS can revoke your 501c3 status, but not necessarily for political reasons. It could be because you did not fill out your 990 form. And that's a typical reason why many smaller or newer nonprofits lose their status and don't even realize they've lost their status, is if you don't fill out your annual 990 form every year. And if you don't do that 3 years in a row, they automatically take your status. I did a video on this before, so if you need more information, check out the video I'm linking above. Also, if you are not adhering to your charitable purpose and what you put on your application for 501c3 status, then the IRS can review your activities, mainly through the information that's provided in the forms you submit to them, and they can say that you are no longer eligible for the protections afforded by tax-exempt status. Also, if you violate the rules related to 501c3 status concerning lobbying or endorsing political candidates, or if you carry out too many activities that are not tax exempt. So if you have a lot of business activity and you're making income, but it's not based on your charitable purpose, that's another way your tax exempt status can be put at risk. So the point is, know what those rules are, know what the boundaries are, and make sure you stay within those boundaries, and make sure you document all of what you're doing. The second thing I recommend is that you keep your board in the loop. So a lot of people are frustrated because it's so hard to gather a board when they're new and they're small. But the benefit of having a board is that the responsibility is shared. As a founder, it is not meant to be all on your shoulders to bear the burden of raising money, managing, and launching your nonprofit. It is a shared responsibility. When it's a shared responsibility, if one person is not good at looking at laws or understanding and interpreting laws, there may be someone else who's good at that and can do that research and communicate that to everyone else. But when it's just on one person, you're relying on your skill set, relying on your capacity to ensure success for your organization. And I don't know about you, but I don't want the success of the organization to be just on my shoulders, especially if I don't own the organization and I legally am not entitled to the organization as an individual. So the second thing I would recommend is have a strong board and make sure your board is committed and engaged in the process so they also understand the rules and compliance. My third suggestion is to document everything. You may not realize it, but you should be documenting all of your meeting minutes and never throw your meeting minutes away. Any major decisions regarding money, how you handle money, how you accept money, how you spend your money, any major policies around that, you should have it in writing. Any decisions you make should be written down and should be documented in terms of how you voted for that and who voted for that. If there ever comes a time where your mission comes into question or your activities come into question, you want to be able to easily find the documentation that backs that up. Have policies in place that support why you make decisions that you make, so that if the IRS does come knocking and they want to look at your information, you have that. You have your minutes, you have your policies in place. One good place to start if you're looking for policies is the National Council of Nonprofits. They have a lot of good examples of policies you should have in place and rules, not just concerning how you make decisions, but also how you collect money, how you fundraise, things like that. And the last thing I'll say is always be ready. Sometimes people who are new and small feel like they're in a bubble. Well, I'm too small, so that won't impact me. Or we're just getting started, so that has nothing to do with me. I want you to understand that what's happening to Harvard has everything to do with you and can absolutely impact you. And the impact can trickle down. So you can't afford to have your blinders on and say, well, this doesn't impact me. Because 2 years later, there may be a new law or a new initiative that has something to do with the decisions made with this mess going on with Harvard that will directly impact you. But if you weren't prepared, if you weren't planning, if you weren't looking ahead to see how it could impact you, then it's going to blindside you. And you can't afford to have a business and not be strategic about it. So you should be looking at what's happening in the environment around you, the political environment around you, the economic environment around you, locally, nationally, and globally. And once you do that, you'll be able to make better decisions and you'll be better off. So this video wasn't made to scare you or try to intimidate you. It's just to make you aware and make you informed. The best kind of nonprofit founder is an informed nonprofit founder, and that is the point of this channel, that you get the tools you need to make good decisions to have a strong nonprofit. If you need help with your nonprofit or you're thinking about starting a nonprofit, comment startup checklist below. I will send you a link to my free startup checklist. And if you need help with your nonprofit, make sure you visit me at bossonabudget.com and check out all the other videos I have on my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.